Hey there, this is Natalie, and we now have ReZero Arc 7, Chapter 16, which is called Imperial Affairs. I'm going to get straight into the new chapter, but as always, please consider subscribing, because I'll be releasing these summaries for Arc 7 with each new chapter that gets released. Now, this chapter ends in a pretty crazy way, and I'll give you my theories about that at the end. But first, let's get straight into it. The chapter begins with Subaru, Rem and Louis preparing to enter the walled city of Goral, and while Subaru is happy to see a civilized place for the first time since arriving in Wallachia, he's troubled by the fact there's a guard checkpoint that they're going to have to pass to get into the city. He is very aware of the fact he doesn't have any Imperial identification and that foreigners are not allowed into Wallachia at the moment. As he thinks about this, Rem, who is sitting in the special backpack the Subaru made so that he could carry her, warns him that if he frowns, he'll look more suspicious. Subaru asks how she can tell that he has wrinkles between his eyebrows when they're back to back, and she says that she can tell from the feel of his breathing and his heart rate. He asks if she means he should hold his breath, and when she sighs in reply, Subaru is happy that it isn't with hostility or disgust. It says that he wouldn't be able to argue if you were to say his aspirations were low. Louis tries to line up with the people waiting to pass through the checkpoint, but Subaru and Rem discuss why they can't simply enter the city by passing the inspection normally. Subaru feels lost, given for the first time he doesn't have someone who knows the Wallachian Empire to discuss what's happening with. He thinks about Abel and wonders if it's because of his situation that the inspections are so strict. He thinks about this aloud, and Rem says that maybe he's not so worried if he has time to think about things that don't matter. Still, he says that actually he does have a plan. Rem doesn't believe him, and he can feel her frowning at him from behind his back. Then the scene changes, and they have actually passed the inspection and are through the city gates. It's hinted that Louis' existence helped in this. Subaru compares the city to the cities of Priscilla, the royal capital, and the city of Kostul, which is close to the Roswell mansion, and thinks that while those Lagunican cities are all different, they also have certain feelings in common. This city, Goral, is different. It's less ornate and colourful, and more practical and utilitarian. Since it's a large, well-populated city, Subaru says that it's appropriate to use it as a measure for cities in Wallachia. Rem says that she doesn't want to stay too long, and then asks Subaru to put her down, so he does. Now, Rem, walking with her cane, sees the same view of the city as Subaru, and she looks impressed. Subaru remembers that because she has no memories, this is the only proper city she's ever seen, and the largest number of people. Subaru tells Rem that if she wants to do some sightseeing, it isn't a problem, because after all, she helped him with Flop. Rem says that they shouldn't keep Flop waiting. Now it becomes clear how they managed to get through the inspection. Behind them is a cart drawn by a creature called a pharaoh, which is a type of oxen used instead of ligers and ground dragons to pull carriages. A man with golden hair is waiting, and Subaru talks to him. His name is apparently Flop, and he helped them get past the inspection. With him is a woman called Medium, who is wearing clothes that expose her legs and shoulders, and has a strange hairstyle with lots of different bunches, as well as 2 swords at her waist. She is Flop's sister, and their last name is O'Connell. They're merchants, with Flop in charge of the commerce, and Medium escorting her brother safely around. I guess she's kind of the bodyguard. Subaru used his knowledge of merchants, from knowing Anastasia and Otto, to find a way to appeal to them as business people. In the end, he offered them the backpack he'd been using to carry Rem, in exchange for them helping him get past the checkpoint. He had been prepared to offer the Demon Beast horn if he had to, but Rem had been willing to let go of the backpack the Subaru made, because she can walk with her cane now that they're in the city and not hurrying to a destination on foot, and Subaru also says that he planned to make a new backpack with better materials now that they've reached the city. Rem also says that walking means she doesn't have to be so close to Subaru's stench. Now it's revealed that Flop and Medium think that Subaru and Rem are a married couple, and Subaru is worried that pretending this will make Rem angry. They're going with the story that Rem and Subaru are married, and Louis is Rem's older sister's child that they're taking care of, because Rem doesn't look old enough to have a child as big as Louis. After establishing that Rem isn't angry, which Subaru was especially worried about, the scene changes and they've found an inn. They've chosen a fairly nice inn because it's important to keep themselves safe. The rooms have been divided between men and women, so Rem and Louis will be staying in the next room to Subaru and Flop with Medium. Subaru is bothered about this because it means he can't keep an eye on Louis. Subaru is lying on his bed in the inn, enjoying the comfort and the moment to relax, when Flop comes in to join him in their room. They manage to sell the Demon Beast horn, with Flop helping in the negotiations, and now Subaru has a bag of Imperial gold coins to fund their future efforts to return home. Here there is a conversation between Subaru and Flop, which kind of sets out Flop's interpretations of the Imperial values that have been a theme throughout Arc 7 so far. He says that him and his sister working together and making up for each other's shortcomings so that they can be stronger together is the Imperial way. Subaru naturally finds this version of things a bit easier to get on board with than the other versions of Valachian values that he's heard from Vincent and Todd. Subaru says that to be able to move, they'll either need a ground dragon, a pharaoh, a liger, or a knight to escort them, and this needs to be managed with limited funds. Flop says he knows the taverns where he could help Subaru find what he needs, and agrees to help him. The conversation turns to how tense the situation in Wallachia currently is, and Subaru asks Flop if that has something to do with the Emperor. Flop responds by referring to the Emperor as His Excellency Vincent Wallachia, and talking about how, since he was crowned, things have been less turbulent in the Empire, and that he believes the Emperor will make things better still in the future. This obviously surprises Subaru, because it shows that Flop at least believes Vincent is still in power, and thinks of him as a good and popular ruler. As Subaru knows it, Vincent was driven out by his ministers and generals. Flop talks about a statement made by the Emperor, and the timing doesn't add up. Subaru thinks either the statement was actually made by one of the ministers who drove out Vincent, or that the man Abel that he knows is actually just a crazy guy who's lying about who he is. He doesn't really know what to believe, but he sees no reason why Flop would lie to him about the affairs of the Imperial capital, so he does at least think he can trust what he says about the matter as being what the people in Wallachia believe to be true. Now Flop proposes that he and Medium could be the escort for Subaru, Rem and Louis, and Subaru is thinking about this when suddenly there's a loud, sharp noise, and the scene changes. Now Subaru feels like he just blinked out of consciousness for a moment, and he's in mid-conversation with Flop, but Flop is saying the same lines he just said moments ago. Subaru is confused and listens to him carrying on to say just the same things as before, and he comes to the realization that he might have just returned by death. And on that cliffhanger, the chapter ends. Now, if this really is a return by death, it will be the shortest one we've ever seen, with Subaru probably having only a couple of minutes to figure out what was going on before whatever it was happens again. He's just having a conversation in an inn where he should be safe, and aside from the noise, there was no experience of dying for him to work on, so it would seem like if he died, he was killed instantly by something. He wasn't described as feeling strange in any way before, so it doesn't seem like it was death by mana poisoning, which is something we're expecting to come up sometime soon. In Arc 5, Subaru only had a short time between his save point and his death, but it was 15 minutes, which is still considerably more time to look for a solution. Plus, there was always the option, though one that Subaru would never take, of avoiding the square where Sirius was going to act altogether, and thereby keeping himself safe without having to solve anything. Sotella's goal with Return by Death seems to be to enable Subaru to avoid dead ends and save himself. It doesn't consider saving others, but it doesn't spawn him right into a dead end. Now, if this is Return by Death, the save point seems strange in relation to previous ones. It usually returns Subaru to either the last safe point in time, where he can take actions to avoid death becoming inevitable, or in a couple of cases, to right after something that he doesn't seem to be able to repeat, due to it being outside of normal time and space, like the witch's tea party or his time in the Hall of Memories. He hasn't had anything like that happen here, and hasn't been in any obvious danger for a while now, and we know from the save points in the capital and Priscilla that Return by Death doesn't seem to choose only moments where he's in a private location or anything like that. Out on the street can be considered safe if nothing in particular is threatening him. Equally, if the save point updates with progress, the main progress he made was getting into the city. So again, the choice of this moment in the bedroom with Flop, just moments before the thing that killed him, seems a bit strange from the logic we've seen before. If the threat is in the inn, then you'd think he would be returned to the point before they went there. So with all of this strangeness, no memory of death, no reason to assume they'd be in danger, and a weird save point that doesn't seem like it would fulfill Sotella's goal of allowing Subaru to avoid his own death very well, I think we have to consider it possible that this is not Return by Death at all. The other possibility that could make a lot of sense is that Al is somehow nearby and is using his authority, causing a brief rewind in time in the local area. The sound that was heard was described as distant, so it could be that Al is involved in some incident or fight going on outside. Since Al's ability is widely thought to be an authority, and Subaru has been shown to become resistant to the effects of authorities after some exposure to them, being able to see Betelgeuse's unseen hands after a while, for example, perhaps he is caught in the range of Al's authority, but he now experiences time changing and keeps his memories of the previous versions of things. This is just a theory, but we do know Al is going to appear in this arc, and now they've reached a proper city, it would seem like a time when some existing characters could be brought back into the story, so I don't think it's too unlikely that this is what's happening here. But what do you guys think? Personally, whether it's a particularly short and mysterious death loop, or a sign that Al is around, I'm happy either way, because either of those options sounds interesting, but I'm hoping we do get Al and Priscilla soon too. That's about it for this video, but I'll be back with the next chapter once it's out. Apologies that my voice sounds a bit ropey on this one. I've been auditioning for some voice acting work, and yesterday I kinda overdid it and wore my throat out a bit, which is also why I didn't record this last night and waited till this morning instead. But thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again very soon.